Muy bien, buenos días. Just as a reminder, this will be in Spanish, so for those who don't speak Spanish, there might be need of getting the translation. Muy bien, buenos días a todos. Gracias por estar aquí a pesar de las caipiriñas y el horario futbolístico. Y bueno, estoy seguro de que no se arrepentirán de haber venido. Tenemos un gran panel. Bueno, sin más dilación y por una cuestión de tiempo, vamos a entrar ya directamente a las charlas. El tema general, como ustedes saben, es perspectivas y retos de la renta básica en América Latina. Y para hablar de ello contamos con, en primer lugar, Louise Haagh, que va a abrir la sesión. A continuación hablará Rubén Vuolo y finalmente cerrará la sesión Pablo. Vamos a hacer algo del tipo 15, 20 minutos, más bien 15 minutos cada uno, de modo que luego tengamos unos 15 o 20 minutos de discusión. Ok, Louise es una investigadora danesa, pero afincada en Inglaterra, en York, y que ha trabajado durante mucho tiempo en temas de América Latina. Es especialista, entre otros espacios, en Brasil, Chile y fuera de América Latina, en Corea del Norte y también, sobre todo, en el norte de Europa.
¿Corea del Norte?
Perdón, Corea del Sur y
Eso
Europa
sí me
del
parecía
Norte.
muy exótico.
No Corea del Norte y Europa del Sur. Esto es el efecto de la caipiriña, ¿verdad?
Sí, verdaderamente.
Corea del Sur y Europa del Norte. Además, bueno, es miembro, creo, de la red del Citizen Income Trust, de la red británica del ingreso ciudadano. O sea, adelante, unos 15 minutos hacemos. Perfecto.
I'm going to speak in English. So, and I'm going to take a global perspective and then look at some challenges that global perspective presents for Latin America. I'm going to discuss specifically how the challenge of introducing basic income and reducing inequality connect. And in doing that, I will make two assumptions. First, I will assume that we value the basic income not just for what it will do to reduce inequality and uncertainty, absolute poverty and insecurity, but also for what it can contribute to a broader sense of emancipation in the form of greater personal control, greater developmental liberty for people. And second, I will assume that the access to enjoy this sense of personal stability is strongly systemic. It depends on a systemically high level of social equality. And what this means is that the basic income is not the only area of public finance that we need to support. Now, I'm first going to look at some general elements of this problem, the connection between public finance in general and the basic income. Then at some institutional aspects of stability, which explains why it is that we need a pluralistic perspective on public finance. And finally, I'm going to draw some implications for policy with specific reference to Latin America. Okay, so the challenge that a systemic view presents is that it points to a high and progressive level of taxation to sustain the range of redistributive policies that modern complex economies require. Equal freedom nowadays is not just about access to basic assets. It's also about control over economic processes that individuals find it hard to predict. Indeed, because our power to predict economic processes have fallen in the last 10, 20 years, the basic income on its own cannot secure our control over other goods that are ultimately critical to our sense of personal stability, such as housing, skills, or occupation. We cannot assume that with the basic income somehow we're going to be able to access these goods. Private transactions, in other words, individuals' transaction with each other in the marketplace have become in many ways a much less effective vehicle for control and for the attainment of personal stability. And for that reason, we're better off agreeing to collectively fund, organize, and redistribute access to a key set of economic goods. Okay. Now, this doesn't necessarily present a challenge for the basic income defense, but it does present a challenge for that part of the defense that is libertarian, that presents with the choice between basic income and other areas of public policy. This defense tends to see a conflict between the egalitarian principle of equal shares, of which the basic income is an example, and universal social insurance, because this takes away power away from people in favor of organizing things collectively. In other words, we can no longer rely on the basic income to create a new society from below. We need to commit ourselves ex ante to a set of egalitarian distributions of property rights besides the basic income itself. Now, as an illustration of the problem of the libertarian position, I will refer to the Danish libertarian Hollenberg, just to keep myself away from present debates. But I think the Danish libertarian Hollenberg, who wrote in the 1930s, actually is very symptomatic of what I call the anti-systemic libertarian position in basic income discourse. Hollenberg wrote, I quote, the state does not have the capacity to assess individuals' work capacity and therefore cannot form any opinion on how the collective production life should be organized. Now, it's the second part of this statement that I have a problem with. It doesn't follow, as far as I can see, that because the state should not compel individuals or control individuals directly, it should not organize opportunities for people. Okay? So I want to accept the libertarian position that is entailed in the first part of this statement, which relates to the treatment of individuals. Let's call it the partial position. But I'll reject the libertarian position as relates to democratic state governance, which I'll call the anti-systemic position. And this is the anti-systemic position that you often find in basic income discourse. And ultimately, my case for doing that rests on the evidence that we have of very strong systemic aspects in the distribution of stability in the very thing that we associate with the basic income, including in the most deregulated economies. In other words, even in market economies that are highly deregulated, we find that the distribution of stability is highly systemic. And I'd like to take Britain, the United Kingdom, as an example. In the United Kingdom, radical deregulation of labor markets and of tax has induced one of the fastest growing pay inequalities in the OECD between top executives and average workers. Between 2000 and 2009, this gap grew from 47 to 81 times. Of course, this is not as high as the United States, where the pay gap is over 300, but it's a very, very significant rate of increase in earned income inequality. More importantly, what we see is that in parallel with this inequality in education between the fee-paying, we see an increase in inequality in education between the fee-paying and the state sector. Private fees during this same period grew by 83% in real terms, whereas average incomes grew by only 1/3 of this. So you can see a discrepancy between the income distribution from earned income and the access to opportunities, education opportunities, which of course we see as the foundation for other opportunities, occupation opportunities in particular. And half of this rise, I should add, occurred in the last 5 years. This, of course, has continued to the concentration of access to occupations, something that also I think basic income supporters are very concerned about. The share of top lawyers, for example, that are drawn from the 7% of the population who go to private schools is 70% of the population. Okay, so a complete discrepancy between the access to good education and good occupation, or good occupations. Now,